Greetings for the 5th HTML5 Developers Conference. As many of you know, this is a conference that started by developers, and we are here because of your support and the wonderful talks that many of you give. It's about technology. It's not really about whiz-bangy, you know, somebody coming up and giving a bunch of marketing promises and things like that, which is a wonderful, and many, many other conferences do that. This conference is technical, and that's always what we will serve. And every time we do it, we learn something new. This is a new time for us in Moscone, and I think, you know, I'm looking today and marking off in my head all the things that, you know, I want to do differently for next time, because what works in a hotel doesn't necessarily work in Moscone. But at the same time, it's wonderful to be here. It's wonderful that we've grown to the point where it makes sense to be here. And I really, really appreciate the participation, and I hope you have a lot of fun going around to the different conferences. We are delighted to have the support of Intel and many of the other sponsors here. And they can tell you about what's happening in their part of the industry, because we believe that's also part of the technology. I mean, in the technology world, it's about new APIs, new thoughts, new standards, and it's also the people behind the products that move the industry too. So all of those things are useful, and all of that information is useful, and I really appreciate you being here. And we look forward to you having a wonderful day. And enjoy. Thank you very much. We're doing a I had thought that being Intel, and they're ultra organized and wonderful, and I guess they courteously left the introduction to me. I had figured they would go through theirs. So we have someone who directs many, many engineers. He's a physicist by trade. He's the kind of person that built Silicon Valley, and they are the people that made the playground that we live in. Will you please welcome Christos?
Hi. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I know that it's 9 a.m., and as far as I'm concerned, for most of you, it's midnight still, so I apologize for that. I've done a lot of software development, and it's not exactly pleasant to get up at 8 o'clock so you can come listen to somebody at 9 a.m., so thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm sure that you're all wondering what in the name of God a hardware company is doing on stage at an HTML5 conference. So to begin, I want to do a very brief introduction about myself. I basically run the developer relations division at Intel, which is responsible for all of the engagements that we do with wonderful people like you in the developer space. And it's part of the largest software and services group over there. So by training, however, I'm an experimental high-energy physicist. So I used to build colliders at CERN and do all of the other things and basically create pattern recognition programs and all of the other great stuff that you guys know. But I gave it up about 14 years ago, and I joined Intel because I really wanted to do something completely different. And one of the things that I've learned is that one of the biggest secrets, actually, that Intel keeps is what we do on the software side of the world. And what we do on the software side of the world could qualify us as one of the top 10 software companies in the world by any measure, be that revenue, number of people, etc. So today, I want to talk a little bit to you about, you know, what happens in HTML5. You know, many of us still remember when HTML5 had no name, that it was just basically an idea of extending, in a sense, a markup language. And for those of you that don't remember, it was called the WOD Working Group. So as the idea morphed into a promise for us, in a sense, for cross-platform development, we attracted a lot of controversy, but we also attracted a lot of believers alike. And this kind of believers became the Grassroots effort and the Grassroots Working Group, with a vision about how the world might evolve around HTML5. Now, this grassroots organization and effort of believers have evolved in a community which is large enough to basically fill this particular room. I know that a lot of you remember the older days of HTML5 conference where it was basically in hotel rooms that we used to do. So this is not just any conference where I would say that business people pass in the hallways. This is a community that is coming together in a sense to acknowledge the achievements and chart the course of the future. And that's what I want to talk to you a little bit about. From an Intel perspective, we're very proud to be part of this growing community. It is growing because we have a collective commitment to an open cross-platform world. It is also growing because the vision is unifying more and more parts of the industry, and it's creating a way forward where in a time of transition in the way people are using computing is changing, and it's changing dramatically. This kind of change in industry and how we deliver that kind of computing is becoming more and more important. And these changes will benefit not only this growing community of cross-platform and cross-device developers, but it will benefit everybody. So what I want to do is discuss a little bit how we got here and how did we get there, because it is an extraordinary moment for us, and it is worth understanding how did we get here. So if you look back, and a lot of you probably don't remember those things, but I will ask a couple of questions of you, is that the industry has driven three very distinct chapters in computing. What we call the era of task-based computing, the era of lifestyle computing, and we are now entering a new era, which we believe is called the era of integrated computing. So let's talk about each one of them a little bit more. The first era of task-based computing has its origins in the mainframe. So I'm going to ask you a question. How many of you have heard of punch cards? My goodness, that's impressive, okay? How many of you have used punch cards? All right, that's much better, okay? All right, that's much better. Now you all know how old I am too, okay? So that mainframe was all about tasks. And because it was very expensive, I still remember when I started first using the Cyber 175 a long, long time ago, specifically for punch cards, it was driven as a very, very scarce resource. You know exactly what you wanted to do, so the task had to be very important for you to use it. But as we moved into the PC era changed that scarcity and changed the way the world was looking at computing, and in a sense, it democratized it. It started out as very task-based again, but eventually it bridged into the next phase, which we call it the lifestyle computing. In lifestyle computing, you are driven by Moore's law. And Moore's law is basically the traditional law that we have at Intel that says that, actually it's not even a law, it's much more of an observation that we have, that every 18 months or so, every 12, 18 months, we can actually shrink things and put twice as many transistors on every device as possible, which basically gives you a lot more capabilities. But it put that general type of computing like notebooks, tablets, phones, etc., into the hands of everybody. And you could take it with you and go anywhere you wanted to. And this lifestyle computing is extremely device-centric. And as those devices become more and more numerous, as they become smaller, but even more importantly, as they become more affordable, we find ourselves transitioning basically into this new integrated era of computing. In this new era, computing has to become seamless. It has to become seamless because it simply becomes part of the environment that we all live and work. And we not only carry devices, but those devices seamlessly have to integrate with the services and the platforms that we have in the cloud. So the interplay between those devices and the cloud is how computing will become much less about the device and much more about what a user is trying to accomplish. So to complete this kind of transition, this kind of integration of computing has to provide ways to solve problems that we have previously not even attempted, in a sense, to solve. And a lot of computing in this very new era will happen without direct human intervention. It will be machine-to-machine communication, it will be human-to-machine communication, and of course it will be machine-to-human communication. And it will become the nervous system of the infrastructure that we all have to basically live with. In this kind of computing, sensors will go everywhere, and they will collect a lot of information, and some of you already know that there's a lot of information being collected by a lot of people these days, and they will supply it to many different things. They will supply it to your medical devices, it will supply it to cars, it will supply it to anything out there that basically can interact with you, and it will be in a host of other systems out there. From whichever way you can calculate this, we believe that, especially from analysts, that in the next 7 years or so, there will be 50 billion connected endpoints that will require us to do things with. This means that basically the things that we do will have to change, and they will have to change in a way that the way we design our hardware and we design our software will have to evolve. So let's talk a little bit about this. In the hardware side of the world, we've already moved towards what you would call a system-on-a-chip type of architecture, which is also known as an SoC. But that becomes the standard unit of computing. The logic, the memory, the network, the I/O, graphics, and every other control function actually is integrated in a simple, single package that goes everywhere. That's the direction actually that we're taking at Intel at this moment. And from an Intel perspective, we have a lot of experience of basically integrating a lot of those functions and making them very affordable for everybody else, including the silicon features, the various functions that we have across the different computing units, and of course firmware. That kind of SoC, as it integrates, it allows this functionality to go into everything in a sense. For us developers, it will work. We will have to learn how to work in a world where you have to assume that massively produced, scalable, and inexpensive intelligence will be everywhere. In terms of software, you will have multiple operating systems and operating environments running on these devices and endpoints. Some will be on Android in its variations, some will be Windows, a lot of it will be on iOS, a lot of other type of flavors like Tizen and Firefox and everything else, especially in the embedded operating system vendors as we go into this 50 billion unit of things, as this kind of computing of the Internet of Things emerges. And at some point, they will all touch Linux at one point or another. What this means for users is a lot more freedom of choice than they've had before, but what it means for you as developers is navigating a world of very incredible diversity in both form factor, devices, operating systems, as well as end user preferences. And amid these diversities, you will have a very big challenge. You will have a challenge of delivering a seamless user experience in a consistent framework that allows you to be creative. And this needs for consistency amid this kind of computing diversity of both operating systems and everything else that we discussed is why this community now feels the Moscone Center. So let's transition into what we believe are HTML5 and how HTML5 can turn freedom of choice into a complete design strategy. At first glance, this kind of freedom of choice would not seem to be a problem in this industry. But actually it is, because although we have a very rich diversity of both devices and operating system, as well as end user preferences, we also see that there is some verticalization that is already beginning in this industry. And as it gets hold of it, we need to basically react accordingly. And it is important for us to realize that in order for us to succeed, we have to keep open cross-platform tools and technologies at the center of this industry. So to discuss this a little bit more, openness creates common ground for developers and interoperability for users. And it creates in such a way so that you work to promote an openness of any industry development so that the ideas can thrive in this cross-platform world. From an Intel perspective, whatever you do, we want you to have the best possible platforms optimized in the best way so that you can develop your applications and your services and basically run them seamlessly across all kinds of devices and form factors. And to that, we have several examples that I want to go through with you in terms of how we help to achieve it. First, we're a major sponsor of the Linux Foundation. Consistently, we have been one of the top 2 contributors to the Linux kernel source code base. And we will continue this effort because we believe that openness of this kind is extremely important for this industry. We also work very closely with other open type of environments, including, of course, Android, Tizen, Chrome, and the rest. Now, many of you may not realize that outside of Google, Intel is among the largest contributors to both the Android and Chrome OS operating systems by making sure that we work on the Chromium as well as the Android open source projects. We continue to saturate the Android stack with this type of optimizations. And as you can see from this particular diagram over here or over there, whichever way it is, okay, every layer of the stack has been tuned to run optimally on what we do at Intel. We've done specific core upstream enabling for all of the Android open source projects. We've optimized highly the Dalvik runtime. We provide bridging technologies for the NDK apps as they run. We also offer a set of tools for Android development, and those tools will allow you to optimize the Intel apps and systems, but also allow you to compile natively for ARM. And we do this because we have to maintain that commitment to openness and choice that we have. On the Tizen side of the world, we are one of the top contributors to the mobile as well as the IVI source, and we are working towards creating an application environment for Tizen that will allow for its success. And of course, we have an enormous amount of contributions that we have made on Chrome. Specifically, Intel is delivering both power and performance optimizations upstream to the Chromium projects, which will get, of course, incorporated later on to the Chrome OS. But we want Chrome as an OS and as a browser also to run best on Intel. And those type of efforts make sure that Chrome stays open to the industry by basically applying all of the things that we do on the Chromium side of the world. As we move forward, I just wanted to give you a very brief overview about all the little things that we do across Intel. But what I hope that I convinced you is that we're trying to be as OS agnostic as possible. We try to optimize every operating system to run best on Intel, and we want to make sure that we make every effort to be fully optimized on these platforms. But as part of this effort, we're also to be driving force behind all of these open source projects and standards. We want to continue to support HTML5 as it matures. So let's talk a little bit about that specifically. HTML5 has followed what Gartner calls the hype cycle. So in this particular hype cycle, you have expectations for a new technology rising beyond reality, and then reality slowly sets in. And then as the technology becomes more mature and starts demonstrating its real capabilities, it gains its own momentum. I think that we have passed the stage of hype and the stage of maturity, and now we're beginning to basically emerge the state where we can demonstrate what really happens here. For one, I'm very happy actually that we're past this stage, because I remember in the older days, in the early days of HTML5, HTML5 basically could cure diseases too. So we now need to step into the forum where all of these things can take place. So let's start to see what we can focus on to make the things about HTML5 and what does HTML5 do well. HTML5, in my view, is developing into a widely used standard language. It provides a uniform, effective way to write cross-platform applications, in some cases services. It saves time and the need to rewrite, recompile, and retest the same type of application over and over again. But more importantly, HTML5 has the potential to keep the promise that so many other languages in the past and so many other past efforts did not and could not do. So that's where I believe HTML5 is going next. And although HTML5 will not replace everything, and it cannot replace everything, it has to become the foundation that brings other tools, languages, and different approaches into the integrated computing era. So we know that there is no one right way where everybody can develop in this new era. We also recognize that there is still a place for native programming, and that is why I mentioned briefly earlier that we're developing a set of tools that allows basically Android to become an even bigger platform than it is right now. But HTML5 can play a larger role in the industry than just one programming choice among many. It has to become the foundation for application creation. And as long as we keep HTML5 open, cross-platform, everyone, including native programming, will actually benefit. And that's a very important point, because HTML5 can be the structure in which, as we design the apps for a multi-platform world, we're enabled to switch to native programming where performance, when it's absolutely necessary, can take place. Yet, with HTML5 as the overall context of what we need to create, we will reduce costs and we spend less time in terms of developing the application and much better time to market in the process. Our support for HTML5, at least on the Intel side of the world, is also part of our commitment to keep it open and a cross-platform across the industry. We contribute to the open web standards through our participation in more than 50 W3C as well as ECMA. And that includes some major contributions to the open web platform specification testing of W3C. It includes major contributions, and as we are one of the main proponents for starting the W3C systems applications working group and for APIs, specifically for packaged HTML5 applications. We are also partnering with Mozilla to implement parallel JavaScript into the open web. To add all of this, in February of this year, we also took the opportunity to acquire the tools from AppMobi that form what we call the basis of the Intel XDK. And we spent the last 6 months evolving that SDK into something which we call the XDK New. Now you're going to ask how many hours of marketing did we spend in calling it from XDK to the XDK New, but let's not go there, okay? Which we are launching today, okay? So we're very proud of that. And this is going to be now available on Windows, it will be available on OS X, and will be available on some Linux hosts. So you can actually develop on your favorite operating system. We're also integrating open source technologies such as the brackets from the Adobe Brackets editor, I should say, the Ripple emulator, and we've added support for both Cordova 2.9 APIs and have added, a help tool that we call the App Designer. The App Designer supports multiple mobile UI frameworks, and it allows you to create the basic layout and feel of your app in basically very short time, most likely in minutes. All this allows you, in a sense, to test, emulate, and build for multiple operating systems and multiple things like Android, Tizen, iOS, Windows, the Chrome OS, the Amazon and Facebook, in a sense, frameworks, Nook, in both Windows 8 Store as well as Windows 8 mobile phone. And we will continue to enhance this kind of offerings. But more importantly, I would like to invite you to check this out, and to check it out because it's also free. So we decided to not charge anybody and give it away for free because we believe that by using it, you can help it make it a lot better. But we also recognize that there is no single right way to use HTML5 across applications. So we have worked to make sure that the various toolsets work together. We also have worked to collaborate with other major tool suppliers, such as, for example, as Adobe, to make sure that we are not disenfranchising any portion of that community. And you will hear a lot more about this from our note tomorrow morning. And we recognize that this kind of app tools alone are not a complete solution. A complete solution will require to have an open cloud to basically finish this kind of integrated computing era environment that we're discussing. So we're working very closely to augment this kind of cross-platform tools with a cross-platform cloud to give you greater access to draw on. So we recently expanded some of this from an Intel Services portfolio with the acquisition of Epona and Mashery. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Epona provides you a set of key APIs and key API building blocks for an Intel's network as a service type of solution for any kind of service provider. And Mashery is a comprehensive platform with world access, class access APIs and technologies that has an extensive developer network. Actually, on the network side of the world, Mashery has something like 62,000 apps right now and more than 200,000 developers that basically support the billions of API calls that we do. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. But all of these capabilities, from the XDK to Mashery to all of the stuff that we do on the open source projects and support for this community, as well as the vision for this kind of an open cross-platform capability, bring us to one point where I want to have some of our guests actually come up here and help me. So this kind of diversity, I want to showcase at least some of you. So I would like to invite Gregory, Adam, Jeff, and Matt to come and join me on the stage, and we'll show you a couple of things. Welcome. Adam, Matt, good to see you guys. So let me start with you, Gregory. So you are, don't sit down. So you are from SmartNotify. So tell me a little bit about SmartNotify.
All right, so at SmartNotify, what we do is try to simplify communications. If you think about it, every day there are tons of ways we can get a hold of you. Phone, email, SMS, social, and the Internet of Things is going to make things even more complicated. And that's being a problem because if I have something very important to tell you, I need to make sure that I use the right channel at the right time so you get the information and can act upon it. So what's an important message? Let me take an example. We have an early customer. They're up in Canada. They're a school district. And up there, it's not unusual for the temperature to drop below -20. Yeah, below -20. It's really cold. So things break down. Buses. If a bus breaks down, they don't want the kids waiting outside in those temperatures. In the old days, they had to find a way to alert over 2,000 people as quickly as possible. 2,000 people, I can assure you hypothermia would set in by the time they were done calling everybody. So what they do now, they just come to our application that we built.
Okay, so why don't you show us actually what you've done here?
And it's very simple. I know some of you signed up for that demo, so I'm going to use that as an example. Coming. All right, and then they just broadcast a notification that way. And under 20 seconds, they can send the news and alert to over 2,000 people more. And we started as a HTML5 web application, and then everybody started asking us about a mobile version, and that's where the XDK came in.
Okay, great. So how did you benefit from all of this?
Well, from the XDK standpoint, what was very nice was that we could quickly, I mean, as you can tell, we're definitely not in the business of design. So it's very enterprise-based application, and what mattered is helping our customers get the information quickly, and the XDK exactly fulfilled that role. We could take our existing API, build upon it, and quickly deploy to many devices.
Wonderful. But I know also that there were some things that worked, some things that didn't. So let's be open and honest about this.
Isn't it great? You're at a conference and you can say what doesn't work with
Exactly.
someone who runs a company. But all right, there's a company in San Francisco named Twilio. I don't know if you guys have heard of them, but they're really awesome, and we actually integrate Twilio. And what they did not long ago is come up with a PhoneGap plugin for both Android and iOS, which we use. The moment we decided to do this meant we had to go away from the XDK because of compiling reasons. So right now we're outside of the XDK, and I hope at some point we can go back in because it's actually very simple to deploy for our line of business in B2B.
Wonderful. Now, there were a couple of extra features I believe that you also developed, so if you want to tell us a little bit more.
I don't know about you guys, but I feel we're paying a lot of money for our phone plans, especially for those of us in Europe. And it's really annoying when you start to see data being sent out from the device for no reason, just for companies trying to keep that information out. It's really frustrating. And for our customers, it's the same. And we like to, in whatever we build, we try to remember that humans use it, so we try to be nice to them. And what we found out is that just by giving a log, thankfully we don't have any errors, but whenever they run into errors, we show them the log of what happened on their phone or on their system. And then we give them the opportunity to send us the log, so we don't send the data out right away. And that became almost a gamification aspect of things because you get them involved in the app, and they feel really engaged with it.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So Adam,
Yes.
why don't you tell us a little bit more about Lively?
Okay. Lively is it's an app that's trying to capture live events, something like this. You spent a lot of money. You came here. You're going to see this event. You're going to see other speeches, and then they're going to be gone. And hopefully you can rewatch them. I see them being recorded right now. And so what Lively does is we've created an artist portal so that bands, comedians, all these people that do any sort of live performance can upload their live performance to the app, and then you can buy it right after the show is done. So for example, if he was a Lively-enabled videographer, he could submit the video or the audio from this to our app right after this is done, because the audio is really easy, and it would show up in your app right away. You could download it, so you could keep this particular event forever. Works really good for comedy and other stuff too. I mean, I wish I had some of my shows I went to when I was 16 because they seem so epic in my brain. But who knows? Maybe they're really lame. But if I had Lively, I could go revisit those, childhood memories. So.
Well, I'm glad actually you remember that because I don't remember a lot of the things that I did when I was 16. So that's a completely different story. But I know you also had some things that you did that you had to go basically and do very natively because you required a lot of performance. Yeah. And I know that there's some, good things that we did together, but also some input that you gave us that was quite pointed and very well taken. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So what was cool about being brought up on this panel is each of the guys flanking me here have used XDK successfully and really liked it. And interestingly, Lively was brought in because we didn't use SDK, or the XDK. And one of the major reasons for us was we're dealing with media that someone owns and there's rights. So we have really strict DRM and encryption that's happening. And that's not something that you should expect PhoneGap or the XDK to supply for you. So we built our own layer that wraps web views, and it handles all the communication back and forth. And exactly as you mentioned, HTML is really good at UI, but it might not necessarily be good at playing video. So we send video right over to the native client and let that play at high res, which gives us AirPlay, which gives us all sorts of kind of cool capabilities that way.
Wonderful. But I know also you did use a couple of the Mastery APIs.
I did use Mastery
APIs. Okay.
And those were super easy. The Explorer that's on your guys' website is awesome. It lets me sort of, put some variables into a form field and hit submit, and boom, there's some JSON. And so I can start to figure out what to do with that JSON from there. But I do have an example of that. I don't know.
Let's take a look.
Check it out. Okay, so I built a sort of little Lively playground app here. And integrated search with the Mastery API of Jambase. And Jambase provides venues and artists. How appropriate for Lively. So instead of our database storing these things, I can now use Mastery/Jambase and look for Moscone, and boom, there it is. I could search artists also, like Del the Funky Homo Sapien. boom, there he is. And so that was Jambase. Jambase was really easy to integrate, and since it was so easy, we also put it in our admin. So that when an artist is creating a show and they're managing their show, they can just search for the venue and say, well, it's at Moscone. Oh, it's none of these. It's that one. And then the bands that are there, we got Dell, the Funky. Let's see if he comes popping up again. There he is. And we got Aesop Rock and all these things. So Jambase was really cool. It made this stuff really easy.
Good. Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'll turn to Jeff and Matt so that you guys can tell us a little bit about Lost Decade games, because at the end, games is what is really fun, right?
Of course.
Okay, so Matt, why don't you tell us a little bit about Lost Decade?
Sure. So we are Lost Decade Games. We're a fully independent HTML5 game studio founded in 2010. Over the last 3 years, we've launched about a dozen HTML5 games on the open web, but also on Google Play, the iOS app stores, and a Mac App Store. And right now we're distributing standalone desktop binaries of our game, A Wizard's Lizard, on Mac, Windows, and Linux.
Wonderful. And I know you guys are making money too, right?
A little bit, yep.
So, that's great. Not a lot of people do this these days.
Ramen profitable.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe, Jeff, you can describe a little bit the game and then tell us about the tool choices that you made and how you did it.
For sure.
Okay?
So one thing that we've been working on recently is a prototype game we call Midtown Mayhem. And it's a mobile-focused game. And one of the big problems with HTML5 is performance, distribution, and monetization across the open web. Of course. So we use tools, some supplied by Intel and some supplied by other companies like Lude, to wrap our games for native deployment and to get better performance, and also to unlock native features of those devices, such as in-app purchases, geolocation, things like that. So we actually have a little demo that we'd like to show. Oh, not that one.
There we go.
That's the other game.
That's the other demo.
One thing that I've learned in all these years is that demos never work the way you plan them.
So this is a mobile-focused game. It's an arcade puzzle game. You'll see it on the screen in a second. But because it's an arcade game and it involves some simple physics and we wanted to have really great polish, we needed better performance than what the mobile web browser can typically provide. Additionally, we wanted the ability to distribute this app to users across the various mobile devices like Google Play and iOS. And if you know anything about HTML5 development, you know that it's very hard to retain users on the mobile web for all kinds of reasons.
So we're still setting that up. There was something, however, did we do it?
Sure. Yeah. Okay, we'll switch
We'll do that.
talk about this game real quick.
So let's talk about the Mac OS game.
Sure. So this is our desktop game called A Wizard's Lizard. It was, sorry?
Is it up on the screen?
Nope.
It was.
It was.
Technical difficulties.
There we go.
Yeah.
So this is our standalone desktop game that we have binaries for Mac, Windows, and Linux. It's got all kinds of fancy effects like lighting. It uses 100% pure canvas. It's 100% JavaScript. This runs in, it's called Node WebKit. It's a fantastic open source project that came out of Intel that we are in love with. Yeah, it was successfully kickstarted about 6 months ago. Did I mention that?
Yeah, you did. But there was one thing that actually that I wanted to have you guys talk about while we're setting this up, which is the ability to actually take advantage of graphics acceleration. So from the HTML5 foundation layer to actually be able to really dig into the hardware acceleration features so that you can make your games performant.
Definitely,
Okay.
yeah. So when we started making games in 2010, there was no hardware acceleration. And as you know, frame rate's critical, especially to an action game like A Wizard's Lizard. And we were getting something like 20 frames per second. But these days, like in Node WebKit, it's using packaged Chromium, and it gets 60 frames per second, even with all these fancy lighting effects and hundreds of particles really standing on its head. It's fantastic.
Okay, wonderful.
The features of the app game interface.
Apparently we have it set up, or not.
Yeah, you just have to go over here.
Okay, why don't you guys go over here?
Greetings.
Okay, so this game, we can bring it up on the screen. Oh, it's under the Elmo, great. This game is a mobile game. We used Cocoon.js in this specific example to wrap up a native HTML5 game. This is pure HTML5 JavaScript running against the Canvas API. Cocoon.js allows us to basically translate all of our graphics calls into OpenGL so they run extremely fast. We get great HTML5 audio. If you could hear it, I guess it's not coming through the speakers. And it also gives us a really easy way to deploy across all kinds of platforms with the same code base, no changes whatsoever. And so the time it takes to develop this app in JavaScript is very quick, and we can basically upload it to a cloud service and have APKs and iOS builds within 5 minutes. And so this has been a very good thing for a company like ours because it's only us, and having to wear so many hats means that any advantage we can get in efficiency is extremely important.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Really great having you guys. All right, thank you. Take care, Gregory. Thanks. So to summarize, we've seen some examples of how basically this kind of diverse type of application development can happen using basically HTML5. So although these are not only a couple of snapshots, it is possible that this kind of community behavior, community development, etc., has to grow. And as we live here today, I want you basically to make sure that we are all connected with each other. So I want to invite you basically to join us in the Intel Developer Zone, where you will find a lot of different type of valuable tools and conversations that we all have together. And I personally need your help to make these things better, to tell us what you need so that we can keep things open and help you provide for them. In addition, we also have something which we are sponsors of, which we call the HTML5 Hub. It is a site built by developers for developers, and it is another place where you can learn and share. And two of the founders, Todd Motto and Kyle Simpson, are here today. And they have developed basically, and they have significant projects where showcasing this kind of capability for HTML5 there. Kyle's project, I believe, was the history of the Mario Brothers, and I think that Todd's project was actually featured in the Rolling Stone. So check it out. So in closing, I want to talk a little bit about where do we go from here, and what's the next, and what is the future of HTML5. As I said in the beginning of my talk, the nature of computing has fundamentally changed as we enter the era of integration and the era of integrated computing. This kind of next frontier, as we face it, will see whatever we do become a part of the fabric of our lives. And as the Internet of Things, together with integrated computing, develops, it will bring added intelligence to both machine-to-machine as well as machine-to-human type of interactions in a way that has never been anticipated. You in the software business and you as developers will have a plethora of wonderful opportunities to explore that type of integration and bring it to life in ways that nobody can ever think of or tell you how to do it. You need to do it yourselves, and you know what to do, and all I can do is help you basically with the tools and the services that we can provide to keep this phenomenon open. But we also believe that this era of integrations will require three things. The first one is wide interoperability, and that has to come from the open standards and the open things that we do. It requires personalization that solves real human problems, and at the end, it will have to be affordable. If it becomes way too expensive, we can actually not move forward with it. I firmly believe that HTML5 holds and has the promise of meeting all of these demands and much more. This is why this type of conference is so critical, and this is why we at Intel are also committed to keeping it open. So together, I hope that we will expand the common ground where everyone has freedom of choice, and I want to guarantee you that you guys are the future of what is possible here. So join us together, and we will make the world better. Thank you.